I know it. I must be sailing on water. Who needs a freedom flyer? For I am fearless, strong, and free from all restraints of this world. I become the sail. The cool water caresses my feet. I gaze in the sky with one jump of a wave. I reach a world of puffy clouds I think of since birth. At last, my sail then becomes too strong. Graceful wings, they lift me from the water to make me the ruler of the skies. I escape. I'm gone. No one, no thing can reach me. I'm racing through the sky with a tail of shimmering light. I'm a shooting star. I am everything I have ever dreamed of being. I am with God, content in his heavenly embrace. I am free. And so you hear the literary push, the feelings, and that's what comes out in the Psalms too. So
a lot of metaphors earlier too. A lot of metaphors.
yes. Okay. You ready?
Welcome back to the Epic of Eden, the Book of Psalms. We are in session 5, and we're still talking about how to best read the Book of Psalms. And in this session, we're attending to the Book of Psalms as poetry. So we've reviewed how the modern reader needs to understand that the Psalms are historically influenced by the cult of Israel, by the theology of theocracy. We've spent some time reflecting on the fact that this book embodies and celebrates the experience of believers, not necessarily the didactics of theological instruction. And we've even given some thought to how we translate these realities of praise, sacrifice, and God slaying our enemies into our new covenant context. So the last thing we need to consider as we approach careful interpretation and application is that we are dealing with poetry, not a chemistry textbook. And so the admonition bears repeating: reader, be careful. So we need to ask the question, what is poetry? Poetry itself is the top tier of what we might know as the sequence of elevated speech, of high eloquence moving into full-blown poetics. In any culture, there are literarily recognized characteristics that let the listener know that he is entering a different zone of speech. For example, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. You and I both know that that speech has been elevated, that we're looking at high eloquence. Poetry is the next step up the ladder. And in any culture, poetry can be defined as, quote, a complex of heightening effects used in combinations and intensities that vary widely from composition to composition. A complex that marks the language as special. Now, some poetry is highly structured, a sonnet, a haiku. These have a very exact structure pre-applied to them before we're even allowed to identify them as a sonnet or a haiku. Some poetry is much more free-flowing, but all poetry, all high eloquence, is designed to move and to persuade. In the Bible, sometimes the target of persuasion is God himself. Sometimes it's the worshiper. Sometimes it's the listening congregation. Sometimes it's all three. And just like music, poetry sneaks right past the barriers of intellect and bias. It moves around and behind the cognitive, and it grabs the soul. And this is why poetry is powerful. All right, what about poetry versus prose? Well, classically, prose is defined as a form of language based on standard grammatical structures and the natural flow of speech. Straightforward or direct might be words we would use to describe prose. Poetry, or verse, is said to depend on rhythmic structure, using meter or rhyme. Prose tends toward full grammatical sentences that build into paragraphs. Poetry tends toward metrical scheme and often some element of rhyme. Samuel Taylor Coleridge defined the two in this fashion. Prose is words in their best order. Poetry is the best words in their best order. I like that. So when you're reading poetry, you can expect word plays, reversing syntax, personification, metaphor, hyperbole, rhythm, and rhyme. And as some things are better caught than taught, let's take a look at some examples. Give a listen to Carl Sandburg, 1960s, and The Fog Comes In on Little Cat Feet. So the poem reads, "The fog comes in on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city, on silent haunches, and then moves on." Not much rhyme there, but personification, imagery, metaphor, absolutely. And if you have ever watched the fog roll in over the San Francisco Bay or Acadia National Park in Maine, and if you've ever owned a cat, you can feel what Sandburg is describing. How about a more classical piece? Let's take a listen to Emily Dickinson, a poem described by some as her very greatest piece from the mid-1800s. "Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civilité." Again, we've got rhythm, we've got rhyme, personification, metaphor, and an inquiry into the hunger of the human soul. How about Lin-Manuel Miranda? I hope you're a Hamilton addict just like I am. In this piece, The Hamiltons Move Uptown, he writes words that haunt me. There are moments that the words don't reach. There's suffering too terrible to name. You hold your child as tight as you can and you push away the unimaginable. The moments when you're in so deep, it feels easier to just swim down. The Hamiltons move uptown and learn to live with the unimaginable. What is it about poetry, about music, about art that gets into our souls in a way that prose cannot? We talked about this in our second session. What is it about a congregation singing out their declaration of faith together or reciting their creed together that transforms the words into something almost metaphysical, something that unifies and defines, that emboldens, that strengthens? I don't know what it is, but I know that it is. According to Wikipedia, that great font of all true knowledge, the reason that armies sing while they march is because the traditional call and response work song keeps an army in step, keeps them dressed, moving in step as a unit and in formation. The cadence unifies them, so they march and move as one, strengthening the weak, emboldening the strong, saving the corporate energy of both, binding one man to the next, and supporting the whole. Oh, I like that. Because when I'm standing in the congregation and someone starts calling out Psalm 100, either in word or in song, I feel that. I feel that. In fact, there's a song that I'm singing a lot these days to keep myself dressed. I mentioned it in an earlier session, Andrew Peterson's Is He Worthy? You need to know that at the moment of this filming, our global community is right in the middle of the most deadly pandemic since the Spanish flu. And at the moment of this filming, my state, California, is literally on fire. The LNU, SCU, CZU lightning complex fires, triggered by 12,000 lightning strikes, is wiping out the Napa, Sonoma, Lake, and Santa Cruz vineyards, our ancient redwood forests, and it's reaching its deadly arm up into Oregon and Washington, even as I speak. So in the spirit of Psalm 136, Andrew Peterson asks us the questions of a responsive reading, a liturgical reading. And this is how it works. Do you feel the world is broken? He sings. And we respond, we do. Do you feel the shadows deepen? We do. But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. And do you wish that you could see it all made new? We do. As with all good laments, Andrew answers with a word of hope and truth. Because although all creation is groaning, a new creation is coming where the glory of the Lord will be the light within our midst. And is it good that we remind ourselves of this? It is. What happens to me when I sing that song in my church? When I see my worship team weaving their talents and their hearts, bending their wills and bowing their heads as those lyrics flow over my people and sink into my heart. When my worship leader asks us, do you feel the world is broken? And I can hear the whispered voices throughout the room, hushed with the weight of the words that answer back, we do. But then our beloved liturgist asks us again, but do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? And my voice and my spirit rises, and like a weary soldier on a long march, I find myself shouting back, we do. Why is this necessary? Why do we need to do this as a congregation? And the answer is because we need to remind each other. We need to tell the story. We need to tell it well. We need to whisper it in the darkness. We need to shout it in the shadows. We need to write it on our hands, recite it in the morning until we believe it and that we can live it and we can see beyond the darkness of the day. And what is it about that perfect turn of a phrase and the power of the ideal chord? I don't know. But I know that when my heart is breaking with either joy or sorrow, the sung worship of the church, the poetry of the church, puts me in a whole different place. I know that when I cannot find the words myself, the artful words of the psalmist, ancient and present, give me the strength, the hope, the joy to keep me dressed for the march. Okay, what about poetic style? In Hebrew, poetic style is different than poetic style in English. So our poetic style, as we've seen, champions rhyme. Roses are red, violets are blue, skunks are stinky, and so are you. Or as my 14-year-old has composed and posted on her bedroom door, roses are red, violets are not. Nice parents always close the door and knock. Okay, the Hebrews, not so much with the poetry. Rather, as James Kugel, the star professor of Hebrew literature at Harvard University for 21 years and my professor, has helped us understand, the common denominator in Hebrew poetry is the seconding sentence. High eloquence in the Hebrew language works with a certain kind of cadence and repetition that is easily recognizable. Taking a look at your slide, this is how it works. A, and as a matter of fact, B. A, and even more so B. A, and in contrast, B. This is a rhythm of sense. So let's take a look at Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3. This is our opening psalm of the Psalter, our Torah psalm. And so our poet begins, how blessed is the one. This is his thesis, and now he's going to start to play. Take a look at your slide. Who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Walk, stand, sit. What else can a guy do with his body? This is the point of the repetition, the A, B, and C. In addition, the seconding is going to include step with the wicked, the way that sinners take, the company of the mockers. All of these are the artist's play back and forth with the concept of seconding. but whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night. Here's a chiasm where meditating on the law is crossed with delighting in the law of the Lord. Your poet can do this any way he wants because that's the point. He's the artist and he's trying to capture you. All right, keep going. That person is like a tree. A little personification here. He's planted by streams of water. He yields his fruit in season. His leaf does not wither. So again, this threefold repetition of both a verb and the product of the tree itself. Whatever this person does, he prospers. So our artist has played back and forth with the positives, now the contrast, the antithetical parallel. Not so the wicked. No, they are like chaff that the wind blows away, a metaphor. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment. You hear the echo? Nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. An antithetical parallel and seconding there again. So this is how Hebrew poetry works. Not necessarily rhyme, but definitely rhythm. Perhaps we should take a look at the familiar words of Psalm 100. How does that one go? Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. These are all postures of worship. Know that Yahweh, he is God. It is he who made us and not ourselves. We are his. We are his people. We are the sheep of his pasture. You can hear the seconding, the extension. Take a look at this slide and see how this author utilizes seconding to emphasize his ultimate thesis. In the middle, know that Yahweh, he is God. And it's he who's made us and not we ourselves. How about we jump to the New Testament and take a look at the Magnificat? And here in Mary's poem, in Luke chapter 1, verses 46 through 48, we see seconding again. Because you know what? Hebrew poetry, it like moves all the way into the New Testament. My soul glorifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. So Lord and God, my Savior, are parallel. Soul and spirit are parallel. A and even more so B, or A and just like B. For he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant, and from now on all generations will call me blessed. Hebrew poetry is all about repetition. Artful, engaging, mind-tripping, surprising, soothing, transformative repetition. Take a look at this diagram of Psalm 1, our Torah psalm again. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord and meditates on him day and night. That is paralleled all the way at the end of the psalm. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, and sinners in the assembly of the righteous. So there's a contrast. We read in verse 2b, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night. That is paralleled with verse 6. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the wicked leads to destruction. As we've reviewed with this psalm, our biblical author is laying the foundation of the book. And he's laying the foundation of the book upon the Torah of God. And all of the psalms in this book are to be read, sung, and prayed from this place. Yahweh is true, and if we serve him, he will watch over our path. A life lived in submission to his law is a secure life. Like an ancient oak in the hill country. Yeah, he is like a tree, assaulted by sun and drought and fire and storm, but thriving because it is planted near the water. And the life of the righteous, it's a fruitful life, regardless of wind and rain and storm. The leaves of the righteous do not wither, our fruit just keeps right on coming. So, God could have explained all of this to us in a botany lecture. He could have offered us a catechism, an instructional manual on 7 highly effective habits for highly effective people, or he could have told us, as Jim Croce is wont to say, with a song. See you next time.